Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this January 14th, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Our first story tonight, we go to Cairo, Egypt, where a Cairo courthouse was bombed as the Egypt referendum begins.
We understand that this small device exploded outside either a courtroom or a courthouse in Giza. That's on the other side of Cairo. We know that the explosion happened at about 7 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours before polls opened. You've been able to see the pictures. I've only seen stills, which suggested to me that windows were blown out nearby. We have been told that that building has been used to monitor the referendum. Therefore, the device may have been an attempt to try to disrupt the election. But certainly here in Nasser City, on the other side of Cairo, there doesn't appear to be any disruption.
Okay, thank you, James Reynolds. And friends, last night we played for you a 60-second outline, summary, explanation of Egypt's constitutional referendum. The BBC has updated that today, so even though it may seem like the same thing, it has been updated. We're going to play the update for you now. And friends, the Egyptians are voting in a referendum on a new constitution which would pave the way for presidential and parliamentary elections. It would replace the controversial constitution approved by referendum in 2012, 7 months before the military ousted President Mohamed Morsi. And what you just saw was a 60-second outline to the background to the vote, a video produced by Michael Hurst. And the Egyptian referendum voting did get underway today amid tight security.
In central Cairo, an eager queue before the polls opened. This is the third constitutional referendum in as many years, and many hope it will bring an end to turmoil and unrest, like Suad, a housewife who was one of the first in line. She told us she would have queued all night because the constitution will help Egypt overcome a crisis.
I want to all the peoples in Egypt come now and say yes, and this is the best for our country.
It's the first time Egyptians have gone to the polls since their elected president, Mohamed Morsi, was ousted last July. He was removed by the army in a popularly backed coup. The military wants this vote to endorse his removal. Well, there's a steady stream of people coming to cast their ballot and more queuing to get in. The referendum is a key test for the authorities. They say the constitution represents the new democratic Egypt. Now, when all the votes have been cast, it looks certain to be approved by a comfortable majority. But the key issue is the turnout, especially for the army chief, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, barely visible in the throng as he inspected a polling station. A convincing result in the referendum could kickstart a presidential bid. He's already shaking hands like a politician. The constitution bolsters the economic and political power of the military. It allows military trials for civilians, but it also promises improved human rights.
Yes, people were arrested because these posters are...
Opponents say they have been silenced and harassed. Putting up these posters calling for a no vote has meant arrest and terrorism charges for 7 political activists. Moderate Islamists say the authorities are giving voters no option.
As long as they are pushing to one direction, which is one choice only yes, it's not a referendum and it's not a democratic process at all.
And you won't vote?
We will not vote.
And supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood aren't voting either. They've been protesting in several locations. The organisation, now declared a terrorist group, has called for a boycott of the vote, saying the constitution is stained with blood. If it's passed, as expected, it may harden the divisions here, not heal them. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Cairo.
And thank you, Orla Guerin. Friends, last night we showed you some scriptures related to a story out of France with Brother Reuben that showed how Reuben lost the birthright because of what's explained here in First Chronicles 5, verse 1. Now, I don't have the slide up to show you tonight, but I'm just going to quickly read that same scripture we displayed last night. From First Chronicles 5, verse 1, where it says, "Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph." Now, who are the sons of Joseph? We went over that last night. Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, both of whom carry his name. They carry the name of Joseph. But there were 2 sons, and sometimes they're referred to as 2 half-tribes of Israel, because there's 12 tribes. Joseph is counted as one of those 12 tribes, but then if you count Ephraim and Manasseh separately, well, you're counting half-tribes, because they carry the name of Joseph. But the half-tribe of Manasseh are the descendants of the United States. The half-tribe of Ephraim is the British Commonwealth, the people of the United Kingdom today. And the people of France are Brother Reuben, who lost the birthright to the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, because, as it explains here in 1 Chronicles 5, verse 1, for as much or because Reuben defiled his father's bed, his father Jacob, Israel. He defiled his bed, and the verse goes on to say the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. The birthright itself would normally have gone to Brother Reuben, France, but is not to be reckoned by the birthright. Reuben lost that birthright when he defiled his father Jacob's bed, and God passed that birthright on over to Joseph. And Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. That's why you see the great blessings to the United States and to the United Kingdom. And, you know, there's one other verse that refers to Reuben. Before I play this story from today's news related to Reuben, and I believe we turned last night to Genesis 35 and verse 22. If you want to turn there with me. You know, we do cover news on this program related to the Bible and prophecy. So friends, once in a while we're going to open up the Bible and look at the scriptures that relate to a piece of news. And in verse 32 of Genesis 35, it says, or God says through the writing of Moses here, "And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben," now Reuben today is modern France, and so the father of modern-day France, Reuben, one of the 12 brothers of the sons of Jacob, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, And here's the point I wanted to make sure you got today. And Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. So the whole country heard it, and as the whole world is hearing this story, dear friends, related to modern-day France and its French president, Francois Hollande. He said today in a newscast, you'll see it in a moment, he is experiencing a difficult moment in his private life following claims of an affair with an actress. But he refused to answer questions over the report, saying private matters should be dealt with privately. But a reminder, all Israel knew of Reuben's affair, or Reuben's affair with his father's concubine, Bilhah. Gavin Hewitt has this report from today's news from France.
A French president in crisis drew hundreds of journalists to the Élysée Palace for a long-planned news conference. For President Hollande, there can scarcely have been a more difficult moment. His partner is in hospital in shock after a magazine suggested he had a new girlfriend. Perhaps inevitably, the first question asked him to clarify his private life.
Everyone goes through challenging periods in their private life. This is a difficult moment for me, but private matters should be dealt with privately, so it's not the place and it is not the time to do it.
That was it. He didn't intend to say any more about it. He did say, however, that his partner, Valerie Trierweiler, was resting, and that he would clarify the situation before a planned visit to America next month, when she would have travelled as France's First Lady. So France finds itself in the extraordinary position of not knowing whether it has a First Lady or not. But he was asked whether his secret meetings with an actress, which involved travelling on the back of a scooter, had compromised his security.
Partout, ma sécurité est assurée.
My security is guaranteed, everywhere and at all times. When it's private, it's a lighter protection, but everywhere I'm protected. Nobody should worry about this.
But the photographer who had taken the pictures of the president visiting this apartment formed a very different impression.
The president was in an apartment without any security, even outside. I even saw the president walk around the block.
Some of those watching the news conference said the president appeared to be playing for time to sort out his private life.
It's a mix. I mean, he can take time, but he also has to find a solution, and it seems to me that it's going to be brief to find a solution.
The other problem for the president was that he had intended this news conference to be about the country's sluggish economy. He did say that if France wanted to retain its influence in the world, then it had to reinforce its economic power. At a time of protests over unemployment, the president announced today 50 billion euros of spending cuts and reducing taxes on companies. This is a leader trying to redefine himself as an economic reformer.
Merci.
But today was an ordeal for the president. At times he appeared strained. As he left, there was a supportive arm waiting for him. But ahead he still has to clarify whether France still has a First Lady. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Paris.
Friends, in our next story, we turn to South Sudan, where more than 200 civilians in South Sudan have drowned in an incident involving an overcrowded ferry on the Nile, according to an army spokesman. Women and children were among the passengers fleeing fighting in recent days. Some 355,000 people have been displaced by the fighting between the South Sudanese government and rebel forces, according to the UN. Andrew Harding reports.
At the weekend, 200 people, perhaps more, were drowned when they tried to escape the fighting in Malakal by crossing the River Nile on a boat. We only have that from one source at the moment. That's a government military spokesman. I think it gives you a sense of the difficulties of assessing what's going on here, that it's taken until now for the news to come out, and it still can't be confirmed by any independent people on the ground. This is a very difficult conflict to escape. There are no particular front lines. It's a war, a conflict that involves not just two straightforward armies, but a lot of militia groups on both sides, frankly, and civilian defense forces. So it's very difficult for civilians to find safety. But the Nile itself, several hundred meters wide at Malakal, is a pretty good dividing line, and that's something that people have used to escape across, both in Malakal and also further south in the town of Bor, where we were a couple of days ago. We saw a lot of people coming across to the west side of the river, where there was indeed some protection.
Excuse me, and friends, there's been a lot of news lately regarding World War I, and I'm kind of glad to see that, because I think this reminder is timely for us that since World War began in the early part of last century, it's really been only a recess between the first round and the second round, and now another recess between round 2 and round 3 that's going to be coming. And the BBC has taken diaries of British soldiers describing life on the front line during World War I, and they are being published online by the National Archives. About 1.5 million pages from soldiers who recorded their lives from the outbreak of war to their departure from Flanders and France will be made available. The project is part of the government's World War I centenary program. Here's a report on that from Robert Hall.
Here I sit outside our headquarters trench in the sun. All should be nice and peaceful and pretty. What it actually is beyond description. Trenches, ammunition tools, caps, etc., etc., everywhere. Poor fellows shot dead are lying in all directions.
Thousands of war diaries, 1.5 million separate documents. Once the fodder for authors and researchers, now they're available for the first time at the click of a mouse.
The order to retire was at last given. And
these are the day-to-day lives of the men and the regiments of a giant army, the attacks, the food, the horrific casualties, neatly typed onto official military forms and stored away for decades.
The names carved onto our local war memorials are the most obvious reminders of the First World War, but all of us will have a direct connection with somebody who served in this conflict. The hope is that these diaries, released into the public domain, will give more and more people the opportunity to follow a personal trail.
This is Operation War Diary, underway at a school in Southampton. Students reading the hitherto unseen documents are tagging names and events, adding to their own knowledge and improving the archive's search engine.
They talk about their supplies from the Battle of Mons, about for their cooking, and from the sounds of it, they're getting quite annoyed because their supplies aren't reaching all the way through.
It just shows you what happens behind the scenes and how these men actually lived and what the quality of their lives were at that time.
You read it and you take it in, but when you then have to specifically point out things, it again just immerses you even more.
Holes where shells have struck, branches torn off trees by the explosion. Everywhere the same hard, grim, pitiless sign of battle and war. I've had a belly full of it. Ghastly, absolutely ghastly.
The eyewitnesses have left us, but they survive through the curling pages of their final observations. Robert Hall, BBC News.
Friends, as one of our generals said, war is hell. And there's more World War to come, unfortunately. But fortunately, after that, Jesus Christ will be returning and establishing the kingdom of God on earth, a time when swords will be beat into plowshares. And that's going to be a wonderful time, a wonderful world tomorrow that we're going to see. With last week's cold weather around the world, there was a town, an ancient town in Tibet, that was destroyed by a fire that raged for 10 hours on Saturday because of something to do with that cold weather we had. Nearly 300 houses were destroyed in the blaze in the tourist town of Dukzong. Chinese officials, as you'll hear in this report, say that fire prevention equipment had been closed down to prevent pipes from bursting in last week's below freezing temperatures. Yvette McCullough has this report.
Snow falls on the ruins in Dukzong as locals begin the overwhelming task of rebuilding. 2/3 of the ancient tourist town was destroyed on Saturday in an inferno that raged for just over 10 hours. Around 2,600 people have been left homeless, and much of the town's 1,300 years of ancient Tibetan culture and structures have been reduced to rubble. Local reports say the fire started in a local guest house when a faulty electrical outlet set fire to a curtain. Chinese officials say there was a $1 million fire prevention system installed, but it was turned off at the time to prevent pipes from bursting in the below freezing temperatures. And those temperatures also hampered efforts to stop the blaze, as water pressure in fire hydrants was lowered. The wooden houses burned quickly, while fire trucks were unable to penetrate narrow streets and alleys. The destruction is a devastating blow for a town where tourism is the main industry. Dukzong's preserved cobble streets, ancient structures and Tibetan culture have drawn increasing numbers of Chinese and foreign tourists. And while the residents can now begin to rebuild, the history lost in the flames is something they won't be able to replace. Yvette McCullough, BBC News.
Well, friends, last night I promised you that if we had time in the program, I would show you a video produced by the BBC that shows how the paper, the high security paper that is used to make money, is produced. And we ran out of time last night, so we have just time to show you that and maybe one other video yet tonight. The Landquart paper mill in southeastern Switzerland has been making this specialty security and specialty paper for more than 100 years. It's the only mill in the world that makes the paper that's used for the Swiss franc. Once the paper is produced, it is sent surrounded by high security to other factories where the currency notes are then printed. Marco Zython, the production manager at Landquart, showed the BBC how it makes the money.
So we are here at the cotton preparation system. We get our cotton combers, that's the raw material for the banknotes. We put the bales here, we stand them up, and then this cotton plucker, he sucks and takes away the cotton, sucks it to this cleaning station, and in a cleaning station we sort out plastics and metallics, so everything what should be not within the banknotes we sort here out. And good material we put to the bleaching process in the next building. In this cotton bleaching system we add here the caustic soda and the hydrogen peroxide as the bleaching chemicals. We cut also the fibers. We put this all in this long conveyor belt, and from this conveyor belt we put the fibers into the next PV system, and there we cut again the fibers and we wash out the bleaching chemicals. We have here our raw material, the cotton combers, very dirty. We clean it in the system before, and after this bleaching process is finished, we have here a whiteness something about 89 to 90%, and we pump the solution about 4% consistency to the next chest. We are here at our brand new paper machine. We produce here the banknotes. So we add the fibers on the mold. We add there also the security thread for the banknotes. We press out the water and we dry the fibers and the paper. Then we size the paper so that it's printable, and then we dry it again and have a quality control at the end of the paper machine. We use different molds to produce different watermarks on these molds. There are the watermarks on, and for every batch, for every banknote production, we have to change this mold, and then we can start again, and then we have a new banknote.
Okay, friends, did you get all that? So now you have an inside look at how this high security paper is made. So any of you out there who are planning to do some counterfeiting, you know what you're up against here. I'm only kidding. I hope none of you are planning to do any illegal activities like trying to make your own money, other than in some honest way of earning money and being paid by someone. All right, for a nice light story, we're going to show you how. I'm going to show you something nice and light, but first let me just make mention of this. I know some of you may have heard of this, that Israel, one of its defense minister, made some comments in anger against the Secretary of State of the United States, against Mr. Kerry, regarding his involvement in the Peace for Peace, as I have often put it, spelling it in a little different way, peace, P-E-A-C-E, for a piece of land of Israel, for a big piece of the land over there. And Israel has been upset. So the defense minister made some comments against the Secretary of State. Now the United States is upset against Israel for this. And so there's a little row going on between Israel and the United States. We'll be keeping our eye on that. By tomorrow night, friends, we'll bring you up to date, probably with video, on exactly what the latest happening in regard to that row between the United States and Israel is on that. But to close with something light tonight, let's show you how noodles are made in the centuries-old art way of making noodles by hand, as it's still being done and kept alive by a handful of masters in a fourth-generation string of noodle makers. You'll be a lot less likely to get in trouble with this story than you will be trying to make anything out of like the last story of making your own money. Of course, after you watch this, I don't think you're going to want to make your own noodles. This is hard work. Watch this. This man grew up watching his grandparents and parents make noodles the traditional way, and decided to quit his job as a home renovator in the city to come back to his hometown in central Taiwan and carry on this profession. But he may be one of the last of the last. Nowadays, few young people want to make noodles the old-fashioned way, as it takes as much as a whole day to produce one batch. This man's long working day begins at the break of dawn by making flour, salt, and water. And with credit to the BBC News, who went to see him make a batch of noodles. He's almost finished here, folks. Just give him another minute here. Oh, wait a minute. He's almost got it. We're out of time, though, friends, and we're going to have to sign off for tonight. Thanks for joining me for this Tuesday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back tomorrow night with the news updated through tomorrow of the current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.